There are records that live in the alternate universe of famous bands at the height of their powers. Think Steve Hackett's Voyage of the Acolyte featuring Prime Genesis members that should be a part of the band's discography, or Carlos Santana and Buddy Miles' underrated gem captured between two landmark albums. Music that to this day still struggles to get the recognition it deserves, and no list could be complete without the Rolling Stones. If you're a fan of Let It Bleed and Sticky Fingers, you have to own a copy of Jamming with Edward, a live in the studio jam that keeps puzzling collectors to this day. It has the sound of Let It Bleed's production with the energetic pulse of Sticky Fingers, yet the Stones' own Wikipedia entry puts this on their other albums. But is it deserving of the afterthought category? Featuring 3 members of the Rolling Stones, plus 2 brilliant session players, everybody's friend Nicky Hopkins on keys, and Buena Vista Social Club mastermind Cooder. A collection of songs captured in the middle of recording an actual Stones album. The story behind it is fascinating. I discovered this through an online review website, which rightfully and chronologically put this in the Stones' discography. A shocking piece of information it was for me, and with my deep appreciation for records that time forgot, I wanted a CD copy, yet my hopes of scoring one were low, close to zero. Everything changed years ago on Facebook Marketplace. Someone was selling a bunch of albums, including this one. The price was $7. I messaged him and drove to his house at lightning speed. He was amazed I wanted the album he described as a crappy Stones album. I looked at him with a poker face and didn't say a word that might change the agreed price. The last thing you want to say is, "It's an underrated treasure," and boom, $20 up front. I just thanked him with the caps lock key on, and later bought another classic rock CD from him. He didn't have a high opinion of it either. Maybe he had bad taste, you know? So while looking for my next episode idea, I came across my CD copy, and here it is. Welcome to the exquisite blues jam sounds of one of the greatest British recording sessions. I'll tell you who Edward really was. This is the making of Jamming with Edward. It's early February 1969 in London. The Rolling Stones resume recording of their 8th studio album, Let It Bleed, at Olympic Studios, reprising the working conditions of Beggar's Banquet. Jimi Hendrix's creativity was captured there, and Led Zeppelin cut their debut, meaning the rock and roll vibrations were at an all-time high. The Stones worked out the tracks for what would be a landmark recording, including feature anthem, Gimme Shelter. The band dealt with Brian Jones' Trouble Agenda, signaling into his devastating finale, while Mick Taylor would be given a small role midway through the year that began a prolific tenure with the band. In short, the Stones were changing, the times were changing, there was room for improvisation. American musician Jack Nietzsche played keyboard parts on the Stones' most recent albums, Aftermath and Between the Buttons. He brought his fellow countryman, Ry Cooder, for Let It Bleed. Cooder's involvement changed the course of Keith Richards' guitar playing and Stones' history. His studio work was exuberant in style, from Captain Beefheart to Arlo Guthrie. The albums showcased his chops on guitar, bass, mandolin, and his signature slide work that became a fixture in his arsenal. A guest spot by Ry Cooder became a frequent album credit. All through March 1969, Cooder played mandolin on Love in Vain and slide guitar on Sister Morphine, which remained unreleased until Sticky Fingers. It was during these sessions that Keith Richards was introduced to the long-running tradition of the open G guitar tuning by Ry Cooder. Rooted in both the blues and American folk music, it helped players enhance their slide guitar work, as well as expanding the sound of chords into a richer, much fuller sound. Richards decided to take the 6th string out since he really didn't need it, and so was the Rolling Stones' template for future power chord hits born. But there's still an ongoing guitar forum debate over who came up with it first. I'll let you decide. And so we arrive at April 23rd, 1969. There are several sources for what happened next. Some people say Keith Richards had to leave in the middle of the session to take care of his partner at the time. The rest of the band waited on him. Other online sources state there was an alleged Richards versus Jagger beef, which created heated tensions, which may explain why the jam session that followed signaled into a possible continuation of the band without Keith. This is all speculation, but it does amplify on the importance of these spontaneous recordings, raising the uncomfortable question, could the Rolling Stones carry on without Keith Richards? And so they all decided to jam away into the unknown. Cooder on guitar, Mick Jagger on vocals, Bill Wyman on bass, Charlie Watts on drums, and keyboard extraordinaire Nicky Hopkins. He was called in for the Let It Bleed sessions, playing piano on 4 numbers. Since the beginning of his career, he seemed to be at the right place at the right time for British rock. By 1969, he recorded with The Who, The Kinks, Jeff Beck, including the famous session that sort of fueled the birth of Led Zeppelin, pre-King Crimson Robert Fripp, Australian giants The Easy Beats, plus countless albums that highlighted his reliable and tasteful session work. In the studio world, he was just like his 1966 solo debut, Mr. Big. Nope, not that Mr. Big, but the original, Mr. Big. His 12-track LP showcased it all. The man was always in demand. His name became a part of London's electric music elite. He could be a guest musician that actually knew how to contribute as a team player, whether it was piano, organ, harpsichord, you name it, he could do it. Jamming was at the core of the Stones' creative process, and Nicky Hopkins was the perfect man for spontaneous vamps and groove-tastic experiments. Hopkins worked for the Stones in 1967 for their Satanic Majesty's Request, and in '68 for Beggar's Banquet, so it was fitting he'd come back for Let It Bleed, a sort of a trilogy for the Rolling Stones. They gave him a studio nickname, Edward. Where Billy Preston gave the Beatles his unique keyboard depth, Hopkins did just that with the Stones. The 5 men cut 6 numbers, clocking in at 36 minutes. The edits on the album do suggest that the sessions were longer than this. It was definitely capturing lightning in a bottle. Producer for the album was none other than Glyn Johns, who was actually working as engineer for Let It Bleed at the time. John's famous obsession with a live-in-the-room feel was the right choice to supervise the sessions. Let It Bleed was released in November 1969, and the Nicky Hopkins jam session was shelved. But everyone in the camp knew about it. The band setting up their own record label the next year was a confirmation of a promising future for rare material to see the light of day. Yet, fans had to wait. 1970 saw Mick Jagger star in the controversial British film Performance. The movie's soundtrack included the talents of Cooder on guitar. Cooder himself released his self-titled debut that same year. Nicky Hopkins' name appeared in another lost session brought back to life via Atlantic's Lord Sutch and Heavy Friends, next to names like Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck. You can check my episode here on the channel. Both Cooder and Hopkins kept their studio session careers going, while the Rolling Stones hit another home run with 1971's Sticky Fingers, released via Rolling Stones Records. The label followed with a Howlin' Wolf title, a fascinating Brian Jones experiment, and a third catalog release, Jamming with Edward, on January 7th, 1972, almost 3 years after the session had taken place. An album that feels possible to release if you own your own label. Taking chances, a 60s spirit thing in the soon-to-be corporate nature of the 70s. It's a miracle this album came out at all. The funny cartoons were credited to Nicky Hopkins, and you gotta give it to him. The character on the album looks like a precursor to Hank Hill and Dilbert, a style that would dominate 90s animation and beyond. Record buyers were treated to the Edward, yet the imagery does not suggest a blues jam session, but more like a Frank Zappa kind of thing. We see a man smiling only to lose his head, all this through what seems like empty sheet music. The Rolling Stones logo and personnel gave the stamp of approval. A Stones record it is, kinda. The back cover feels like a big inside joke the fans wouldn't understand, but it just adds to the mystique of such an odd recording being made available to the public. Released through the years on vinyl, cassette, 8-track and CD, it definitely looks best on vinyl. It's hard to appreciate the design from a distance, but once you do, it's a non-assuming cover that breaks the ice, or at least tries to. Because this was months before the Stones put out Exile on Main Street, Mick Jagger's notes on Jamming with Edward seem fitting and strange.
Howdy doody whoever receives this record. Here's a nice little piece of about this hot waxing which we cut one night in London, England, while waiting for our guitar player to get out of bed. It was promptly forgotten, which may have been for the better, until it was unearthed from the family vaults by those two impressive entrepreneurs, Glyn Johns and Marshall Chess.
So before we continue talking about this terrific album, we've got to talk about Marshall Chess. Yes, Glyn Johns produced the album, but Marshall Chess, who was also a record producer, had an important role in making this possible. Marshall Chess was the son of Leonard Chess from Chess Records. And as you know, the Stones went to Chicago around 1964 to record some songs at the label. Because they were huge fans of the blues, going to Chess Records felt like a pilgrimage, thus establishing a relationship with the label. Now, Marshall Chess left Chess Records around 1969, 1970, and he became president for Rolling Stones Records. My gut feeling tells me they heard the tapes and thought, this is great, we should put it out, and it's a nice tribute to the blues. It's the Rolling Stones with two super guest stars. Why not put it out? So, thank you to Mr. Marshall Chess and Mr. Glyn Johns for making this project possible. Now let's continue with the program.
It was they who convinced the artists that this historic jam of the giants should be unleashed on an unsuspecting public. As it cost about $2.98 to make the record, we thought that a price of $3.98 was appropriate for the finished product. I think that is about what it is worth. No doubt some stores may even give it away. The album consists of the Rolling Stones rhythm section, plus solos from two instrumentalists Nicky Hopkins and Cooder, plus the mumbled bathroom mumblings of myself. I hope you spend longer listening to this record than we did making it. Yours faithfully, Mick Jagger.
I disagree with Mr. Jagger and this being a little piece of Maybe he felt his vocal contributions were a bit rushed, but that doesn't mean the end result is forgettable. Quite the opposite. These tracks sound like almost one big take on Let It Bleed's Midnight Rambler, and that's a good thing. Maybe Keith Richards was pissed off by this record, realizing it could sound great without him. Who knows? There's no proof of this. But once you hear the record, many questions arise. I'd call the album Variations on a Theme, Midnight Rambler Variations. One of the main critiques haters have against the record is that they're waiting for the main hook to come in, but that's the beauty of it. There's no pressure to get there, just a celebration of musicianship that even at its most relaxed is exquisite. Track 1, The Boudoir Stomp, is a thick-sounding instrumental shuffle showcasing Bill Wyman and Charlie Watts on the forefront of the Stones' sound. Cooder's guitar drives it home, just like Keith, while Nicky Hopkins plays mean piano chops, vamping the rhythm away. Probably the best song on the album, this is a killer What If Rolling Stones instrumental, where you can try out your best Mick Jagger impersonation or play along with it on your favorite instrument. Track 2 is their take on Elmore James' It Hurts Me Too, through Cooder's superb slide work. Mick Jagger's raw and passionate vocals are on point. A slow blues that never hurt nobody. Have a drink and a cigar. This is the sound of an endless night at your favorite bar. Track 3, Edward's Thrump Up, is an 8-minute thump. The definition of thump is a heavy and usually repeated sound, and sure, that's what you get here, but how hypnotic, a meaningful trance of what 1969 was all about. A classic Rolling Stones backing track, and to my ears, a Let It Bleed outtake. Fresh sounding, vital substance, movement frenzy. Track 4, Blow with Rye, begins side 2 as the longest cut on the album, 11 minutes. I don't know what the title really means, but this will definitely blow you away. It lives in the same universe of Hendrix's Voodoo Child, not the short one, but the long one. The song just happens. It builds and builds, and then some. We get Mick Jagger on vocals through what sounds like a slightly distorted guitar cabinet. Cooder on slide, and rhythms steal the show here, always landing on his feet. The single chord style may be tiring for some, but just remember how much you like the Let It Bleed. Side 5 is a bizarre and fun rundown of old school numbers, plus Jagger adding his high-pitched vocal take on the classic The Loveliest Night of the Year. It also includes Hopkins' take on Over the Waves by Mexican composer Juventino Rosas Cadena.
Good morning, everybody.
Track 6, Highland Fling, has Hopkins' take on traditional Scottish melodies on the intro, later transformed into a barrel-down ragtime blues machine that showcases Mr. Edwards' keyboard talents. Bill Wyman plays menacing bass lines throughout the piece. Incredible. The Jamming with Edward lineup never went on the road, but 1972 did feature Nicky Hopkins on the Rolling Stones band that toured the world June to February 1973. Exile on Main Street gathered all the attention, and as you expect, no songs from the Edward record made it on stage, but the improvisation chops remained, and variations of this were performed. Kinda. The album didn't make much of a fuzz in the sales department, despite its suggested price of $3.98. Maybe calling it Jamming with Nicky would have been a better title choice. Edward added to the overall confusion. Reviews at the time were mixed, fairly formless, meandering, not worth releasing, and unpolished and even banal at times. But critics were fair to give Cooder and Nicky Hopkins their due credit. Nicky was even compared to Keith Emerson on one occasion. They said it was a jam session with no real songs, but the undeniable Stones imprint was recognized. Watts and Bill Wyman brought their A game, as always, and some folks thought this was some of Charlie Watts' finest drumming. But in the end, it was hard for critics to make something out of an almost Rolling Stones record. They tried to understand it and were maybe biased by their own Rolling Stones expectations. It became an album for serious collectors and die-hard Stones fans. Where nowadays we're used to expanded box sets with bonus material, no other classic rock band of its era dared to release such a thing in the 70s. Everybody had outtake material, rehearsal tapes, and all, but the Stones ventured into letting fans get behind closed doors into the secret chemistry that shaped their career. I bet people thought Keith Richards was playing here uncredited, because it does sound like the Rolling Stones. Cooder and Nicky Hopkins remain heroes of the Stones saga. If you care to what-if scenarios, take 36 minutes of your time to indulge in music without a destination, but the present, the act of being, playing the blues. This is no bootleg but an extravagant official release. The Rolling Stones are a state of mind. Where Led Zeppelin was captured by an audience member via Listen to This Eddie, how about live in the studio? Jamming with Edward.